Thank you, Roland. I'm just getting my screen shared, hopefully. Sometimes it's a little bit slow. There we go. There. Fantastic. So welcome to today's webinar. And yeah, we are at step 3 of our framework with the acronym ETHICAL, which is all about getting ready for AI. And on Tuesday, we did a session about this step for educational organizations, for schools, colleges, universities, teachers. And today is aimed more at educational businesses. And what I'll take you through is what step 3 is all about, asking you to think about what data you have access to and how you might collate it. Because as we discussed right at the outset, data is very important for understanding problems and challenges, and it's also very important for using artificial intelligence. So we'll explore the types of data that are relevant to educational businesses and the differences between different types of data. And we'll have a little bit of a discussion about multimodal data and its value, because that's a more contemporary approach to looking at data, and there's huge value in some aspects of multimodal data. And as always, I'm going to prompt you to look at yourself, your business, through a data and AI lens, so you can develop an AI mindset. And this is all about trying to see your business through its data, to understand that data better, and then to make better decisions about where you can leverage artificial intelligence. We do use some AI techniques to explore that data. And once you understand the data and what it's telling you about a particular business challenge, then of course you can make better decisions about how to tackle that particular challenge. And as I do in every webinar, I'll remind you that there's a huge difference between human and artificial intelligence, and that we have a rich repertoire of different abilities when it comes to our intelligence. Now, these aren't separate intelligences, they're different elements of a very complex whole human intelligence, but only a subset of these are accessible to artificial intelligence. And it's really important to remember this. And therefore, as we move forward into a more and more AI augmented world, we want to think of ways in which our human and our artificial intelligence can best work together, because that way we're going to build the best kinds of education systems and the best sorts of societies. And I'll use today examples from education businesses. And I'm really excited today because I'm going to be joined for the second half of this webinar by Priya Lakhani, MBE, who's the founder and chief executive officer of Century Tech, which is a fabulous AI company that's born in the heart of the UK in London. So Priya is going to join me for the second part of the webinar, and we'll talk through her perspective on the kinds of data that you might use at step 3 in this part of our progress towards being AI ready. And the team, I introduce them every time, very importantly. So we have Carmel Kent, Mohammed Ali Chaudhry, Mutlu Kukurova, myself, Rose Luckin, Anissa Mweni, and Ben Deboulay. And all of us have a background in learning science, data science, artificial intelligence, and education. And so we've developed this 7-step approach to getting yourself AI ready. Even if you don't want to build a business around AI, you can use AI techniques to understand your business better. And the 7 steps are: we need to educate and enthuse the community in your business to understand why on earth AI might be relevant to them. We need to identify particular challenges that will be the focus of your attention as you get ready in terms of AI readiness. Then we get to today's step, which is identifying the data that you have access to, collating it, cleaning it, getting it ready. And then we'll move on to step 4, 5, 6, and 7 over the coming weeks. And as always, we have a separate track for educators, educational organizations, and businesses, because they have slightly different requirements. But the program, the steps in the program are the same for all of us. So today it's step 3, and it's about identifying data that can help you and pulling that data together. And I think often we are very narrow-minded when we think about data. So I'm going to try and help you think more broadly about the sort of data that you might have available to you. And the reason that the acronym for our program is ethical is to emphasize the fact that we must try and do all of this ethically to the best of our ability. So last time we looked at the sorts of challenges that face businesses, some small businesses and bigger businesses. And there was absolutely no shortage of challenges, particularly at the moment. But we looked at many of them, and in particular, we looked at employees, building a team, recruiting staff. We had a conversation with Kieran Sparrowhawk, the CEO of My Cognition, about the challenges that he faced in terms of recruiting the kind of team that he really needed in his business. And we thought a bit about what aspect of that could be accessible to some AI techniques. And so we kind of refined our talking about staff in a business for the purposes of that discussion, and I'll continue with that example today to get some continuity. We talked about recruiting the best staff, training the best staff, and maintaining the best staff. And that included staff well-being. And we used the 10-step criteria for deciding whether this would be a challenge that we should prioritize in business and make it the focus of our attention as we get AI ready. So we looked at these as 3 different challenges, i.e. recruiting the best staff, training the best staff, and maintaining the best staff. And here's the process that we went through for the maintaining the best staff, which we included staff well-being and the question of why do people leave. And we decided that yes, this was a very important challenge to any business, and it was one where we could look at taking this forward through the AI Readiness program. I just want to highlight 3 points at this stage. Those are big challenges, and so it's difficult in a webinar like this to go into the kind of detail one would go into as you broke that challenge down. So out of necessity, this is slightly oversimplified. In reality, you would break the challenge down into its composite parts and look at the connections between them and weigh up the practicalities of collecting data together, each of those composite parts, and you'd weigh that up against the importance of understanding the challenge, which was all part of that 10-step process. So where do you start? You have a business. What do you look at first? And as I said right at the outset, I think it's very easy to miss some potential sources of really useful data because we tend to look at things through a very narrow lens. We have a habit of thinking about data as being perhaps very much focused on financial data, for example, has traditionally been the case, or productivity. And so I think it's useful to step back a bit and look at your business and think about, well, who are the people in your business? Who are the staff? I mean, are they trainees? Are they contractors? Different levels? Who are they? How many of them are they? Where are they located? And then to think about physical environment. Physical environment can have a huge impact on staff, on maintaining that A team, particularly on staff well-being. And I think we know that at the moment from the current situation where a lot of staff are working from home. And I read this morning in the Financial Times an interesting article about anxiety and people's paranoia and anxiety about working at home. So the physical environment can have a really big impact on staff. So thinking about what data you might have about the physical environment of your staff could be useful. The virtual environment, the platforms, the infrastructure, the way that they enable or don't enable interactions, collaboration, team building. What are the resources that are available to your business, the people who work in your business? Books, technology, equipment, finances, what are they? And what are the connections between the different sorts of resources, the different places where you might have data that's important for the challenge that you're trying to understand through the data you have in your business? And then thinking about what are the connections between all of those potential resources that could, in this instance, enrich the well-being of your staff and help you maintain and build and continue to build that A team? What are the connections between the different resources and the people in your business? And do you have data about that? And I always think it's useful to think about data in two distinct categories. There are many different types of data, but I think it's always useful to think about data as structured and unstructured, because we often miss the unstructured data when we're thinking about what data we have available to us to help us understand a problem. So in this example, and this is a screenshot from a very useful little animation produced by Academy about how IBM Watson works. It's really on YouTube, and I think it's quite a nice introduction to machine learning. But here we can see the example of the structured data as being information about height, weight, eye color, hair color, occupation of a particular person. And then the unstructured data being, lots of different sorts of things about that person, maybe the newspaper that they read, the comments people have made about them on social media, what they put up on their Facebook page, how they're represented on LinkedIn. There's lots of other types of information out there that might be useful when it comes to understanding an individual. So think about structured, but don't forget unstructured data, although there'll be quite a lot of preparation to do with that unstructured data. In addition, we need to think about how accessible and usable the existing data that we have is. And remember, step 4 that we'll go on to in the next webinar is about collecting additional data to help you understand your challenge. What we're talking about today is your existing data. So you need to think about how easy it is to access and how usable that data is. You also need to think about how that data was collected, who owns that data, was the collection ethical and consensual, and does the owner of that data know how to store that data safely, correctly to protect people's privacy and data? Who's responsible for that data? Where is the data stored? How is it structured? How is it stored? And what type of data is it? And how long do you have that data for? So for example, if you're a relatively new business, you may only have data that might be relevant to understanding how to maintain your A team for a relatively short period of time. If you're a much more long established business, you could have data for many years. However, you may have changed your processes in order to change the way that you collect that data in that time. So it may not all be consistent and quite the same. So examples of data that could be about a particular staff team, could be about who recruited them, how they were recruited, what year they were recruited in, what process they went through. And of course, that information must be collected with that potential staff member's consent. It should be stored in a central corporate database and stored very safely. Your chief technical officer or HR department or team leader may be the person who's responsible for that data, or in a small business, it could be you as the founder. But whoever it is, they need to make sure that it's securely stored. The data might be staff CVs, reports from training courses that they've completed, maybe recordings from staff interviews, could be their key performance indicators, the target information, performance information, health information. A whole lot of different sorts of information could be available. And this is another little screenshot from that movie that I mentioned on YouTube before, the animation. After you've thought about the different sort of data, there's always this question about, well, how do you translate what you've got, which might be in lots of different formats, into a language that computers can understand? And that's where we need to start thinking about how we prepare the data and how we clean the data and how we start getting it ready to be processed by our AI modeling tools, our analysis. And that's where we need to think about filtering and selecting the appropriate data. So when I was talking about recruitment processes, I mentioned that if you've a business that's been operating for a while, you could have changed the process through which you recruit staff. And that will obviously make the data that you have about recruitment different pre the change of process, post the change of process. So you need to think about that. You need to get rid of duplicates. You need to try and pull the group together, group of data together, and look for ways of trying to get the data into a space where you have similar data pieces mapped to other similar data pieces. So what I'm trying to say is you're not trying to compare apples and pears. You have your different data elements that are similar for the same data set. So for example, if we're talking about recruitment, the information for each individual who was recruited has the same types of data. And if perhaps you have more data for some individuals because the process when it was changed led to more data being collected, you would need to remove some of that extra data to make sure that the types of data that you have about each of those individuals when it comes to processing that recruitment data has the same components. And this process of cleaning and organizing the data is actually quite time consuming. And I think we often forget about how much time we need to leave for getting the data ready, because inevitably, even in research studies where you are ultra careful in your data collection methodologies, it's still possible to have missing pieces of data. So we need to be very careful that we have full sets and we are comparing like with like. Now, I also said I would say something about multimodal data and its value for educational businesses. And multimodal data is something that we haven't traditionally thought about before the last 5 to 10 years. And yet, actually, particularly when it comes to thinking about how a team of staff are working well together and how you're maintaining that staff and building that staff, it's very much a human interaction process. And so it's complex processes that are about combining people's skills, abilities, knowledges, preference, different personalities. So it's very much multi-dimensional data. And it's not static. That relationship between people in the team doesn't stay the same. It changes over time. So there's also a temporal quality to the data. If you think about a temporal data set, one that's collected and about individuals over time, and compare that to the information that was collected when somebody was recruited, you can see the difference. And then you can think about the way that whatever challenges you're trying to address with respect to building that staff team, they're likely to be really context specific. Or perhaps some people might prefer to think about this as culture specific. And I said earlier, when we were talking about the physical environment, how working at home has a significant impact on people. And so there's also this contextual element to data. And that's also something that multimodal data helps us to capture. So it's about multidimensionality, it's about temporality, and it's about capturing context. So when I talk about multimodal data, what on earth do I mean? Well, here in this image are some different types of data that start to look at some of the multimodal aspects of data. And if we think about multimodal, what we're trying to say, it's about our different modes of interacting with the world. We see, we touch, we talk, we listen, we move, we gesture. These are all different modes of interacting. And so when it comes to thinking about the staff team, you might, for example, have data that's been collected from some kind of a staff survey. I know that as a professor at University College London, we have staff surveys from time to time, not every year, but we certainly have staff surveys, and they're a really important way of finding out how people are feeling, what their attitude to the job is, and how they feel about the culture of the workplace. We might have some data from when that person was recruited from their interview, or perhaps they've had a staff development interview subsequently. So we could have interview that's captured a conversation, and we might have that, for example, as audio or video. Then there's observational data, probably not something that happens a great deal in many businesses, but some people involve kind of 360-degree reviews of individual staff members, and you might have some observational data there. And the top of that image in the middle, that's an example of gesture and actually using technology to capture information about the gestures people are making, particularly as they're interacting. Then below that, we have an example of data that's taken from facial expression. As we're communicating, what kind of facial expressions are we making? Do they encourage others to communicate with us, or do they make it clear that actually we're not wanting to be communicated with at the moment? And also biometric data, you can see a picture of a hand with some sensors on it. You know, it could be that we're collecting information about heart rate or skin galvanic response, or it could be stress levels, lots of different types of biological data that we can also collect. Right at the bottom of the picture, there's some little stick figures, and that's indicating the kind of data that you could collect about how people move. Again, perhaps not something that we would do with a staff team, but it's another example of multimodal data. But right in the middle of the picture and just below it are some types of data that I think are highly likely to be part of many people's staff data set. So a staff record with a photograph and some basic information about that member of staff, perhaps an employee number, perhaps something about their date of birth, gender, other aspects where they live, perhaps some other information. And then again, we might have staff performance review, which we could have information about somebody from that staff performance review. And then to the right, the last two examples are an example of log data, so data about people's interactions with technology, which is the most common form of data when it comes to analysing educational interactions, but not so common when it comes to looking at business and how a staff team is operating. And then video data right at the bottom. You know, we may have some video about people who are members of the staff team. I think it's unlikely, but I put it in there for the sake of completeness, that to give you a full view of the sorts of different multimodal data that might be appropriate. So when we think back to our example about maintaining the best staff well-being, understanding why people are leaving might be perfectly legitimate reasons, but could also be that there's some kind of issue that we need to understand more about. And as I've already said, those are complex challenges and we would need to break them down. But the types of data that I would imagine that you would have in your business straight away that you could collect together would be some kind of recruitment data, probably some kind of interview data, might be a record of the interview that's written. As I say, it could have been recorded. You might possibly have some survey data from a survey that you've run. You've probably got some staff records that give some basic data about members of staff, and you could have something around staff performance review. And then you need to think about these different data sources and what kinds or types of data are within these data sources. And it could be text, it could be numbers, it could be images, it could be audio or something else. And in order to be able to use that data, you need to be able to identify when it was collected. As I was saying earlier, you need to understand how complete that data set is. You need to understand whether the collection of that data was consistent. And you need to think about whether your processes have changed in some way that means that that data source is not going to be consistent because the process that you used for collecting that data changed part the way through the time period that you're looking at. And I think I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions. I'll go back to Roland and see if there are any questions, and we can deal with those questions. And then I'm going to invite my special guest, Priya Lakhani, and we can have a chat about the sorts of challenges that she faces in her business and the sorts of data that she might be able to pull together in order to try and understand those challenges more. And then remember, next time it'll be about whether we need to collect additional resources or data, I should say. And then the one after that will be about how we use, what kinds of AI techniques we can use to understand that data more. So I'm going to go back to Roland and say, are there any questions that you would like me to deal with now?
Not just at the moment, Rose, but
okay, great. I will move on and invite Priya to join us, and I will stop sharing my screen because I think it'll be much more friendly if she and I can have a conversation where we see each other and other people can see us as well.
Just activating.
There we go.
Hi, Priya.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm good. Thanks very much. And thank you so much. I know you're really busy, and it's really great that you're giving up this time for us. And I know from the previous webinars that I think this discussion bit's the most valuable for people who join the webinars because it's much more relating it to their particular situation. So you run a very successful AI company, and it's interesting that you are using AI in your business product service. And today's conversation is very much about thinking about how you can also use data and AI to think about business challenges that you face. And I'm sure that in the current situation, those business challenges haven't reduced, but perhaps have increased. So can we start off by asking you to tell us something about challenges that you think are important for your business that might be the sort of challenges that would be amenable to the kinds of tools and techniques that we could use around data science and AI?
Yeah, sure. So I think, the main challenges of businesses, it looks very different now to what it looked like in December. And so, and we have to be very clear about that. I think that when leaders of businesses, if they are facing the same challenges today as they were in December, I would urge them to relook at their business because I think they're doing something very wrong. I think that the leaders of businesses, whether you are the CEO, whether you're C-suite, or whether you are middle managers, doesn't matter whereabouts you are in the hierarchy, but you're in this sort of wartime management period, and that and there's no nicer way of saying it. I think we're running businesses at the moment who are on this call or who watch this later, they all understand this, and it is wartime. And then the reason why I say that is that a lot of businesses have obviously been fundamentally affected in terms of whichever sector they're in. There might have been sectors that were flourishing in 2019 that suddenly, all of a sudden have just had to pause in a sense because of the restrictions in place. And there are other businesses that, that may well actually be operating and running, but because they weren't ready to be online and work online, and even if they're tech companies, if their tech wasn't all operating in the cloud, and then that would obviously be an issue. And the reason why it's challenging is because even if you are very optimistic about this period of lockdown ending, and the government's very positive at the moment in terms of lifting a lot of lifting restrictions, it's just looking at simple economics. So when a world event of this nature happens, and we really don't have many precedents to look at, we really don't have any actually on this sort of a scale, then you're looking at least an 18-month recovery, in the sense that the world needs to self-correct. And the world self-corrects, from the moment where actually it feels like it can afford some sort of stability. So that you don't start the timer from March in the UK. And I don't know if I have any international people on, but I'm going to be quite UK specific unless you tell me otherwise.
That's fine.
And so we're looking at, the biggest recession that this country has seen. We're looking at, this was the black swan event, if you like. And that's why leadership are having to address different challenges. And so it's not, so I can talk about two things, I think, today, because we don't have too much time, but I think we're all concerned about our teams. We talk about culture a lot. I go around the world and talk about culture quite a lot. And some people take you seriously. Some people actually still think it's quite a fluffy concept. But as Peter Drucker, once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And if you hadn't had your culture right pre-COVID, you've got more problems than those that did get it right and then still had to readjust and struggle. So we need to talk about that, because people are rethinking. We're in the world's largest experiment at the moment, and your staff are rethinking their lives. They have had time to think. They've had time to be at home. Some of them that used to travel, actually, like me, I used to be on a plane every week or two. It wasn't my favorite thing in the world to be on planes all the time, because I've got 2 young children. But we have many people who are suddenly realizing what home life can look like. We have people who have suddenly realized actually how they can be incredibly productive at home. So we have to, I think there's one thing that we can talk about, which is culture. How to ensure that you essentially maintain the new culture. I mean, I don't love the new normal that we're all, we're all talking about new normal a lot. And what does that even mean? It's just, everything's disrupted and upside down, and it will be. And I don't think we don't know what form that's going to settle in. But one of the challenges that we've got as leaders is to maintain our strong teams. It's to ensure that we can increase capacity as required, but also you've got to ensure that you conserve cash, right? Conserving cash is a really big deal. So how are you going to do that? And how are you going to remodel your business, whether you're in the arts, whether you're in engineering, whether you're in whatever, even if you're running a school, right? How are you going to remodel your business, or your organization that at the end of the day has to be sustainable? And sustainable, I mean, at this sense, I don't mean sustainable green, I mean sustainable, it's not going to go bust. How are you going to do that? And what are you going to use? What metrics are you going to use, rather than just your gut instinct, to ensure that you have a business model that is going to survive at least 18 months? So there's that. And obviously with that is the culture to maintain the team, to ensure to hire, and capacity. So I think those two are the two main areas that I've looked at as Century Tech. We are in EdTech, as you said. EdTech has obviously seen a huge rise in online learning, which is fantastic, in the sense that people who would never look at technology for online learning because they were afraid of it, and I'm afraid, I mean, not in the sense of data, actually, it's more in the sense of, is it going to replace me as a teacher? Or they just were a bit not very confident with it, have been thrown into online learning. So in a sense, they're able to now use tools and technologies that make their lives easier. And while that's great, and that sounds like a good thing, and it can be, we also have to ensure that some of the most innovative companies in this space can sustain 18 months, right? Because otherwise you could have some really great anecdotal stories of teachers saying, I finally found, the thing that helps me in the classroom. And then actually the company was cavalier with its spend, with its money, was overconfident. And so very happy to talk about, business in general, leadership of business in general, in terms of sustainability, in the way that I'm trying to, I mean it in this conversation, and also about culture and your people, because obviously we all know they really, really matter.
Well, let's start with people, if that's okay with you, Priya, because I think that follows on nicely, but I would like to get to the business piece as well, because I think that's really important as well. So for you, what kind of data do you have available to you to help you understand how your team are feeling, what their well-being is, how that culture, because I agree with you, that culture is so important. What kinds of data sources, what kinds of information are available to you as a business to help you understand that challenge?
So I'd start all of this by saying, with both conversations, but obviously particularly with people as well, sometimes I think we can we have lots of conversations with people, right? And we are, in a sense, every time we have a conversation with an individual, I have 80 people to look after in the business. We have a conversation with them, we get we think we've got a gut feeling about how that person is feeling, or how that group are feeling. We can maybe divide them into cohorts of, these guys are very happy at home, these guys are quite social, these guys are not talking to anyone. That is data. So that's qualitative data. And I'm going back to basics here, but because people often think, well, that's what I've learned through my conversation. Now my gut instinct is that this team is feeling X way and we need to do something culturally. Actually, you have a data point. That is a data point. So every time you have a conversation with somebody, that's just qualitative data. It's just, it's opinions, it's feedback, and you should note it down. The reason why you should note it down, and this is what I've done, is because you can easily forget. Don't forget, human error is always possible when you're using qualitative. But also, the whole point about, for example, when you're talking about AI readiness and data, we don't need to talk about AI so much. It's about having information that you can use. When you have information, data that you can use, and you've got it down and it's written in the most accurate format at the time when you actually hear, that's why people take notes, right? It's because you're not then relying on things in your working memory essentially disappearing, because working memory isn't as we get older as well, unfortunately. I'm sure this doesn't apply to any of you, but it certainly applies
I'm sure it does.
But my working memory is definitely depleting over time. But I think if you note that down there and then, that is a data point. And what you're looking for when you have these personal conversations with your team is, as you note down, one conversation to the next, you're looking for a pattern in that data. And then you're also looking at anomalies. That's basically what you're doing. And this is essentially it's the very bare basics of essentially what data scientists are looking for when they're doing their jobs. They're looking for, is there a pattern here, right? Or are there anomalies here? And anomalies are always really interesting as well as the patterns, right? This is the point. And so obviously when we're doing this day to day, we do it all the time. You do it all the time. You're all data scientists in your own way. And so that's what we did. We went around, we spoke to everybody, had individual conversations, noted how everyone was feeling. You have to do that regularly, obviously, because people were kind of in shell shock, you know, when this first happened. They all suddenly got moved home, and then they've adjusted. And as they adjust, they find new challenges, new problems. And then, you know, what we did was we asked certain questions. And when we asked certain questions, this is my barrister training helping me a little bit, so I'm cheating. But when you ask questions, you have the choice of asking leading questions, right? And I noticed we have a lawyer on here, I think, from Freeths, because I was looking at who was on this. And they actually do, they do pretty good seminars, actually, law firms do on AI and EdTech, etc. So I'd look them up. But when you're asking questions, you have the choice of asking open questions or leading questions. If you ask a leading question, you have the answer in the question. That's very, very difficult to get good data from. So if you, if I say, hey, Rose, are you finding it really difficult today? Yeah, it's more of a leading question. It's sort of pointing you in the direction. If you say, how are you feeling? Yeah, and it's more open, Rose can say anything. You can see how the information that you're getting in that qualitative feedback is a little richer, right? It's a little, it's less, it's not led her in a certain direction. And particularly when a boss is asking these questions, you definitely don't want to be, Rose, so are you feeling fantastic and productive today? You know, of course she's going to say, yes, I am, and I'm doing a great job. I earn my salary, you know, it's just being a bit sensible. If you then track all of that, you can start to see, particularly if teams are affected, whole departments. And then obviously what you can do with that information is empower the team lead, yourself, you know, and I always think this is a board level issue. You must do this at board level. If not, you know, you haven't got the right culture in your organization. But then you have to come up with tools and strategies that suit you and your people to try and affect change that needs to happen. And when you start asking, so then we sent a survey out, Rose. So obviously things are changing, right? And actually we found that quite a few people said, oh, I love that I'm not commuting. Some people have 3-hour commutes to London, right? Yeah. And I don't want to get on the tube because one of them said to me about family planning, right? So I don't want to get on the tube because I'm interested in planning a family in the next couple of years. And I don't know if COVID will affect me. Very anxious about that. So I thought, oh, okay, let's send a survey out. So we sent a survey out, and the survey's got more of the kind of questions from 1 to 9. How do you feel about this? Whatever, you know, things like that. And then essentially you can end up with a sense of quantitative analysis. So you've got more numbers-based data. And so what I'm trying to say here is just by asking the right questions, just by asking them in the right format, and just by having them noted down at the time, or in a survey when you ask, do you strongly agree or disagree with this statement on, you know, what the new office should be like, or, you know, working from home or mental health. You can ask them any questions you like. You're ending up with data. And then the key is make decisions in your business based on evidence. Make them on data. Don't just make decisions based on a whim, because often the people in your organization who are very vocal about how they feel are the more sort of extroverted personalities. There are some people that don't always contribute, yet they are so valuable in your organization. And so asking them questions in this way are really important. And then it's not really to do with AI. I mean, you know, I know I'm an AI EdTech entrepreneur, and everyone always expects me to start talking about AI straight away. It's not. It's just basic data gathering and making sense of your data. It's an element of data science, if you like. People rush to think about AI. More often than not, when I speak to organizations, I find they don't have a data strategy. And if you don't have a data strategy, there's no point talking about an AI strategy.
Exactly.
Rose talks very eloquently and clearly about cleaning your data, ensuring your data makes sense to you. It's like the difference about asking open and leading questions. You know, what's your data telling you? Is it telling you a true picture, or actually is it biased in some way? These things are really important. And most people don't have clean sets of data. That's just very clear. Some of the largest organizations in the world that have enormous sets of data on whether they're selling in commerce or whether they're running airports, it doesn't really matter. Their data is not clean. They don't have their data in a format where you can share the data and make sense of it. So first, you've got to make sure the data, that the information that you're holding is clean, it's correct, it's reflecting questions that you want to answer. and then look for any strong patterns. I mean, and what's really interesting about these conversations, I always feel like everyone does this all the time. You do this all the time. You do this about, when you're just holding a vote from a family of 5 about which holiday to go on.
Yes.
And it's 3 against 2. We do this all the time. And sometimes we get confused because when we're running a company, we just think, what does it all mean? Actually, it's really simple. It's pretty common sense. But I do urge people when it comes to culture to ask the questions, because now that Century is looking at, okay, post-COVID, what do we do? Some people want to have an office where they can have that water cooler conversation or the making coffee conversation. They really need that. Some people really like the idea of staying at home and having a once a month big social gathering, so how do we make that decision to please people? And so we sent the survey out, we've gathered the data. I've got somebody looking into options that basically suits everybody. And that's how I know that they know I care about them as a leader, because this is not Priya saying, hey, I live in a part of London that makes it easy for me to commute from here to here. That's how a lot of leaders make decisions about offices, let's face it. It's easy for me and now you all have to deal with it. This is more, we've all had a really challenging few months. It's probably going to extend into a lot longer than what we think. How do we care about you? And so that's one element of culture that you can fix relatively quickly. But if you don't ask people the right questions in the right way, gather the information, you're going to struggle. And then I'll just finish this because I've gone on about this, but the second thing is recruitment, right? So when you're looking at scaling up your team because you feel you're in a space, for example, that maybe is doing really well out of the current situation, or you think it will do afterwards when restrictions are lifted. You may well be recruiting what you know, but you may need new skill sets in the new normal, this new phrase. And so as leaders, I don't think there's much science that needs to go into this, but I would use a recruitment firm that uses data really effectively. You can delegate that. So if we have a recruitment firm on this channel, obviously you're sitting with it saying, what do you mean? There are recruitment firms out there that measure skill sets and culture of the talent, and they do that quite effectively, and they have lots of data on the markets, your market, and that's what you need to look for. I think if you go to a general one-size-fits-all recruiter, you get what you pay for. You're going to be spending a lot more time interviewing and sifting through things, whereas I think we all have other challenges that we need to focus on. But anyway, again, I feel that most leaders are pretty on it when it comes to this. We've been forced to deal with the challenges. So, and if there's any questions about that, the culture side, then I'm obviously very happy to answer them.
That's brilliant. That's such a great compliment to the way that I was talking about the data, bringing in the questionnaires and the talking to people, so important. And I also like the way that you were talking about this is more data science than AI. And I think that's true. I think the AI readiness piece is very much about getting into that data mindset. We can also use some AI techniques for some of that data, particularly if you've got a lot of it, but it's not all AI. You're so right. It's about getting ready to really leverage your data.
Yeah, it's the mindset you talked about, Rose. So if you get used, so I had somebody in the team who said to me, it was a really big, so we're on Slack. And by the way, if you're running a company and you're not on Slack, I question why. It's just so much better. It's so much better than WhatsApp, Skype groups, even some of the other messenger groups. It's just an easy way to organize yourselves while you're all focused on being at home and working from home and working internationally potentially. So I think it's fantastic. So on Slack, we had a channel on Slack, because you can separate these work channels. And we were thinking about how to further help schools that are in lockdown, that are closed, because Century's in quite a unique position to be able to help. We opened up our platform for free, but then schools were still struggling. And now, obviously, as of the news yesterday, they announced all this sort of tutoring that they're going to be giving to schools. So we were saying, okay, look, how else can we help? We've got a small army of teachers at Century. What else can we do to help schools? And it was really interesting because a couple of people came up with ideas and they said, I think this will work. And it's really nice to get ideas from your team, obviously.
Yes.
That's what you want to encourage. No idea is a bad idea. But what was really interesting was that a couple of people then responded saying, I don't think that would work, right? And so I did a session with a private sessions, because you don't like to embarrass people on group channels. I never think that's a good idea. But I had a couple of sessions with some of the team members, and I said, look, the I thinks are fantastic because you're thinking outside the box and you're coming up and generating ideas, and Century wants that. That's brilliant. But if you're going to bash other ideas, you need to come up with some evidence as to why you think that is. Because nobody should be making big decisions, dramatic business model changing decisions based on just a whim.
Yeah.
That's what you call a little pet project. And that can be okay when financially your environment is really safe. You just want to experiment. Big companies do this all the time. And you get the Google X's and you get the X everything, right? And, you know, that's fine. But when you're in a situation where urgency is key, right? Time is of the essence, and you are potentially going to invest money when you are being a wartime leadership team. You need to make decisions based on whatever data you can. It doesn't mean you've got all the data in the world and it's going to be a complete success. But you ought to then think, well, how do I back this up? And actually younger team members, and I don't mean younger in age, I mean younger in sort of commercial maturity, as in they've got a little bit less experience, you will find need some coaching in that sort of an area. So for leadership, it might be a good idea to do a session on, you know, there's a difference between having ideas and then backing them up with some sort of data or evidence. Like, you know, for example, one of the ideas is a very successful model that's used by a company in the US. The company actually generates an enormous amount of revenue for them, which is fantastic, but also it's a very impactful model in education. It works really, really well. It helps people. It helps some children leave the poverty sort of cycle, if you like. And it's really, really, and I know about it. So I remember when I had this conversation, I said, well, have you seen this model used there? Because it works there. So why wouldn't it work in the United Kingdom? So it's about that data mindset, Rose, that you're pointing out, which is if you get used to asking questions, but saying, and what can we show to prove that? Can you do a bit of research and see where that exists elsewhere? What you're doing is you're starting to create a data mindset in your organization. And every time you push on that, where it's not just that I think, but because when you think something, even if you're the CEO, when I have an opinion, that's one data point. At the end of the day, it is. And that's why when you have brainstorming sessions, it's good to have lots of people in the room, because 5-6 brains is better than one, right? And the point is that you need a culture, going back to culture again, where people feel they can challenge senior leadership, because if they can't, you're stuffed. And there's no nice way of saying it. I know this is recorded and going elsewhere. You are stuffed. If people think they cannot challenge you as a leader, or let's say if you've got a hierarchical organization and you've got a layer at the bottom of people here and they can't challenge your middle management, then you will potentially lose out, because you need people to have the ability to respectfully challenge, and you need
absolutely
to be able to hear. And that, again, how do you prove that is in your organization or not? With data. You ask, you do 360 reviews. I use just so, like, FYI to everyone, I have no obligation to, or affinity to any of these companies, but I use Culture Amp, right? And I believe if you search Culture Amp or organizations that do 360 reviews, you can probably find one. It probably isn't, you can find one that probably isn't that expensive. We use Culture Amp. We did a 360 review of everyone in leadership. And why did we do it? We wanted to ensure that that there was that element of challenge, right? When they wanted, so there's all the, and what does Culture Amp do? It asks surveys. The surveys are done, so you don't need to do anything. They're all there. They're open questions. They are quantitative and qualitative and data, and then they do the analysis straight away. You get easy pie charts, you get easy bar graphs, and you can say, right, I know exactly which people to focus on. And it's worth doing now, because people operate differently on Zoom and Microsoft Teams and Hangouts than they did face to face.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Priya. That's so useful, and as I say, a great compliment to the slides that I talked through earlier. I want to devote the rest of the session to questions, because they're really important. So I'm going to go over to Roland, and you are our MC. What have we got, Roland?
So there's 2 questions just at the moment. One of them's from me, so maybe I'll leave that one to the end. But Frank has asked, so Frank is a lawyer.
Frank Sutty, that's the one he's from Freeths, I think.
Yeah. So he said a recent edition of BBC Click focused in a very timely way on remote monitoring of staff using technology, which is becoming very possible.
I saw that, yeah.
So for an employer looking to apply data drawn into the business through such processes, what impact might this have on the culture of the business and the perceptions of the working environment?
Yeah, so I saw that technology, and there's a really good, I wish I could tell you, The Economist, if any of you get The Economist, by the way, these are amazing. I stumbled across them a few months ago. The Economist do little mini videos by The Economist. If you buy The Economist, you get a QR code from the magazine itself, and they have a video that features one of these technologies. So yes, how would your staff feel about this sort of remote monitoring? Some systems, when you log in, log out, it's like clocking in and clocking out in a factory, right? And there are systems out there that are monitoring, also using video, etc. It goes quite beyond, what we would expect potentially in the UK. Your business, so your business has a culture that you have developed. Some businesses, may operate very well with their staff being remotely managed in that sort of way, and some would result in a lot of your staff leaving, and the reason why is just the element of trust, and people feel that, why are you monitoring them is the question you have to answer, and you have to answer that very honestly and truthfully. And I think it's unethical when the answer is wrapped up in a package that isn't quite true. And we can say we're doing it because of this, but actually we want to measure productivity. That means you've got a trust issue. If you've got a trust issue, your problems go way beyond putting a remote learning package in, because what will happen is that people will leave, but also, why have you got a trust issue in the first place? Is leadership just not able to, just delegate and trust the team to get on with things? Do you just have a set of micromanagers in leadership, which, and that's really about not empowering your staff. There's loads and loads of material out there, and some of it's free. There are TED Talks about this, but about empowering people sort of lower down the hierarchy, if you like. So, we have a culture at Century where a leader will say, well, I can do that. And then someone might point out to them and say, yeah, but your team can do that too, with a little help. But obviously, if you then give that to your team, they learn, they're sort of training on the job, they feel empowered, and you're kind of increasing capabilities there. So if we ever spot a micromanager at Century, and thankfully I don't think we've got any, because we did have a few, and we just had to say, it's not the right culture for you. We weeded them out. But at the same, so you've got to figure that out first. And then if you are keen on it, you just have to be honest about why. And if there's a really good reason why, why you want to measure productivity in that way, then you need to communicate that to your team and see if they're on board with it. And so I think, it's highly unlikely, I'll be honest with you, that people at home would want to do that. And the other reason why is, if you look at homeschooling, where monitoring is different, right? Because you can monitor people just logging in, and productivity that way, where you're not using cameras and technology. If you are using cameras, you just got to be careful, because just like children, we have to sort of learn about safeguarding and what's going on behind the scenes. You have to do that with adults as well. People forget actually how, that's a similar issue for adults. So just be honest about why you're trying to do it. But if you're trying to do it because you don't think your team are being productive, you've got a bigger issue. If your team genuinely aren't being productive, there are plenty of people looking for a job right now. Half the country has been furloughed, and a lot of
agree.
Yeah, a lot of people are going to be laid off. Unfortunately, it's very, very sad, and a lot of those people are really hardworking. So I would look at, seeing that the world is being disrupted right now, seeing that we are being disrupted right now by a virus, not by a technology, by a virus. How else might I now, in a sense, see this as an opportunity to change things up? But yeah, Frank's right to point it out there. These technologies do exist. They are being used. Just obviously, I'd caution using things like this, because I'm quite proud of the fact that we don't need to monitor our team in that way. You can just tell. You can just see. If you use a communication tool like Slack, by the way, you can it's great for communication, but it's pretty easy to see if people are getting their jobs done, because communication is constant. And by the way, that's one thing, Rose, I didn't mention. Now is the time with your team to over communicate. Like, just don't stop it. Just every day, speak to people, let them speak to their teams, encourage them to speak to their teams. Every month have, an update, have quizzes, do whatever you can, but stay in touch with them as much as you can, because the minute people start feeling disconnected, you possibly have issues. And then managers might come up with things like this, like remote learning technology, remote tracking technology. And it's just like, well, that's not really the solution. You've kind of created a problem in the first place that you actually need to solve.
I agree. I would feel deeply uncomfortable suggesting that to any staff I work with. But that would be something I wouldn't feel comfortable with. But I'd also feel uncomfortable with it as an employee. And I agree with Priya. Why do you need to do that? Surely there are other ways that will motivate people that mean that you don't need to do that tracking. And I think there's lots of ethical problems with that kind of monitoring as well.
Someone put on the chat, it's not, if someone consents to it, it's not unlawful, but ethical and morally, whether it's right or not, and also culturally, do you really want to do that, is the big question.
Exactly.
Frank's a lawyer, so he would know, but so yes, absolutely, you're right, Rose. It's about the ethics and the morals, and while we're all trying to keep our really great teams, you're
exactly.
Yeah.
I noticed there was one other question that came into me, which was about how much data do you need? And I think that's a really interesting question. Yeah. You can certainly learn from small amounts of data. I mean, you can't use some of the deeper analytical tools or even some of the AI tools with small data sets, but you can certainly learn from them. But what do you feel, Priya, as a boss?
It's a really good question. I get asked it all the time, actually. I get asked by schools all the time. Schools actually have vast amounts of data, obviously sitting in their MISs, because they have historical data. And sometimes, just be careful with this a little bit, but if the demographics of students haven't really changed, they're sort of, I'd say semi-reliable. The reason I say semi-reliable is, unless I've seen the data myself, I don't want to say it's completely trustworthy, because data is difficult. You need to ensure it's clean, as we say, and it's, you're not going to be involving any sort of bias in analysing it. So do you need small amounts of data, or do you need vast amounts of data? Well, you touched on it earlier in the sort of seminar part of it, I suppose, which is, you talked about unstructured data. Okay, so what we have is that in your organizations, you collect information, you collect data, if you're using websites, you collect page views, right? Potentially, when do people visit you? You've got Google Analytics maybe on your website. If you're in commerce, you're collecting sales, right? If you're in if whatever you're doing, you're always collecting information and data. With small amounts of data, obviously you can spot patterns in how, in the data, in how people are behaving, and you can make assumptions based on that data, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. As the data sets get larger, obviously you get more robust analysis, because your patterns, what you're looking for always is a statistically significant pattern or correlation. The minute you get something statistically significant, so you're looking at 90% of people feel this way or behave this way, or they do this, they go on my website and then they log off on this page, it's probably boring or unengaging or not really answering the question that they typed into Google, right? This is what you can learn from this, but you have to be very careful about making assumptions if your data set is too small. So at Century, we have dashboards telling us a lot about, how, where people are logging in and logging off, and why, and which subject was it, and what for. And if the data set is small, you have to be cautious about making large business decisions based on a small data set. That's all you have to do. Exercise caution and say, we've only got 50 data points here, so let's wait, because we have potentially 1,000 people that could interact with this particular part of our business. 1,000, we have 50 data points. Why don't we wait till we have 100 before? But let's plan for the fact that the 50 is telling us something. Let's plan for it, but let's actually press the green button and go ahead with making a change and adjustment once we get 100. Right? You can sort of play with data in that way. Now that's small data, and that's fine. That's data analysis. When you've got larger data sets and you're starting to see that you might need somebody to, instead of just plodding through all the numbers and it might take them a month, you might want to outsource that to a data scientist if you don't have one in-house. There are plenty of people that can do data analysis, and I'm sure this institution, that you could advise on that. And that's where essentially you have so much data that somebody might want to write essentially a small algorithm, a script that make sense of the data, right? Because there's so much there, it would take a human maybe a few months. Maybe you want that in a week, right? That's an investment worth making if your business is maybe struggling and you don't actually know why, but you've got lots of data. You might want someone to do that, or because your business is thriving, in which case you need to amplify that, but you don't know what's working. It's like when you're spending money on marketing, you know, they say, well, my marketing's working really well, but I just don't know which third of it. But you've gone and spent 10 million pounds. It's like, well, if you're wasting 6 million pounds, you really need to get, you know, pretty savvy on what's working or what's not. So all the tracking analytics, etc., you need somebody to make sense of that. Then the third stage, now, and this is sort of, say, tiny bits of data, large enough sets where you want someone to actually make sense of it. You probably want a data scientist, a data analyst, right? Then you go to the next step where you've got your core databases with sets of data about how your customers are behaving, what's happening inside your organization and outside with anyone you interact with. And then you're tracking, you're just getting lots of data points from other areas. Maybe it's within the business, but they don't seem to relate to the other pieces of data, right? In a school, you may say, for example, I've got lots of data on how my children learn in the school, right? And how they progress, how they've progressed from March to June in terms of maths, because they've been online learning. Then you've got a lot of data in a separate database, and this data is telling you attendance, right? So this data is saying this is how many kids are actually attending online because they're doing the online registration in the morning. Then you've got another database which is telling you this is how they generally behaved in the last year when they were in school, right? And then you've got potentially a load of data on demographics like disadvantaged versus their peers, etc. What you then might want to do is look at, well, those data sets don't always look like they might make sense to each other, but it would be really interesting to figure out if, and here is a massive assumption, so don't take this as what I'm saying, not very well behaved children from a certain demographic who don't attend regularly or are always late, they're always 10 to 20 minutes late registering for form in the morning, have poorer learning outcomes or poorer progress. You see what I mean? So, and from that sort of data that you've now brought all together, if you end up with that assumption and that is true, and the whole point of unstructured data is you don't want to make too many assumptions about what you're trying to find, because then you actually, you know, you have confirmation bias, right? Put it that way.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to do that. But let's say you ended up with unstructured data, and that was then the you know, the analysis out of that data. You can then make a targeted intervention on those students. And while some people will say, we'll just get their outcomes up, you actually might be able to say, no, it's really interesting. If we can now make a phone call to those 10 students every morning and make sure they're registering on time, and we affect a change there, what does that then do to their outcomes, right? Because their mindsets are slightly changing, they're becoming more disciplined, and you measure that over time. And let's say over a year, you find, and again, I'm being completely extreme here to make the point, but you find it did or didn't do anything, right? Then you have something really valuable and really powerful. You're like, did you know that if you could get children to register on time and not be late, because everyone else is sat down online on their Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, I always have to mention them, Zoom, because I always feel like otherwise I'm preferring one or the other, but they're sat there ready to learn. They haven't missed the first 10 minutes. So the mind is adjusted of, did you know that when it comes to the maths, they're now ready to learn? So I think, so do you see what I'm trying to say? That data is all in separate places. You might not necessarily make much sense of it, but here you go. You now have a potential intervention that could be enormous in changing the outcome. So anyway, that's what I, you know, those are the different layers, and obviously people are in different businesses here. So I've given a very obvious example of schooling, because I think some of us, even if we're not in EdTech, we understand schooling. But that's essentially.
But it's a great example, and it brings home the point about triangulating between different data sources, which is really important. One doesn't tell you the whole story. So that's a great place to end. Thank you so much, Priya. I let that run over a little bit because it was super interesting, and I'm sure it's extremely useful for the people listening and the people who watch afterwards. So thank you so much for joining me today. That's been excellent. I really enjoyed it.
I think really importantly, because someone's asked, if you don't mind, I think it's really important.
Yes, sure.
Do you mind? Just because I think it's
no. If you're happy to stay on, I'm happy.
No, just because I feel, because you know, I'm all about like, how do we do this ethically and building the gold standards. So somebody's asked, how do you get access to the school data? That, in my mind, that data always belongs to the child, right? the school has access to a lot of data. It's up to the school if they want to use that data in that way. So if, for example, you want to create a business with that sort of analytics, what you would want to do is you want to get in touch with the school and say, we could produce this analysis for you, but then the school would need to consent to it. And obviously you need to show that you're GDPR compliant, actually, and I would say beyond GDPR compliant, right? So if people, for example, leave, you delete their data in a certain period of time, etc., etc. But I just wanted to answer that point because
yes, it's important.
I know a lot about school data in the sense that what's accessible and what's not, and I think sometimes people make the assumption we can get hold of it. You can apply for National Pupil Database data, but actually Rose is the perfect person to message online outside of this to ask about the NPD and essentially how reliable it is, because there's a lot of quantitative data in there. Sorry, there's a lot of qualitative data in there that's not necessarily as reliable, and also grades change over every year. We know that, right, by looking at exams and things. So be careful about using data like that. But sorry, Rose, I wanted to answer that because I just think people always think that, oh, EdTech AI companies have just taken all the school's data. They haven't. That's not how it works. It's not, you have a platform and you've got your own data from there that you're generating.
Yes.
Then anonymized. AI should be, otherwise it's biased. So you've got to be very careful about how you structure your systems. But if you want the school's data, you have to go to the school, you have to get consent. The school then gets consent, obviously, from the parents or the guardians of the children, etc., etc. And there's a big process to go through. But if you can generate that data for schools, I think actually, and they consented to it, it could be really, really powerful.
You're so right, and it's a really important point, so it's great to finish on that note. Thank you so much for joining me. That's great. Thank you to everybody else who's joined in, asked some great questions. We will be back again in 2 weeks' time. Tuesday will be for educators and Thursday will be for businesses. So thank you very much and have a great rest of the day. Roland, is there anything else we need to say before we finish?
Visit www.educateventures.com.
Thank you, Roland. Of course, I should never forget it. Thank you very much. Thanks, Roland. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Bye.
Bye.